Good morning, Year 7. Today's lesson starts off with a simple question. Who are these two men that you see on the screen in front of you? Pause the video if you need to talk about it with members of your household, perhaps. The answer is that the one on the right, I would expect quite a few of you to pick up on, is King Henry VIII, son of King Henry VII, who we looked at in the last lesson. The one on the left is also King Henry VIII. It's a trick question, really. I know I've been a bit mean. And I've deliberately chosen these contrasting images on purpose, because the question we're answering today is, was Henry VIII a good or bad king? The picture on the right, you might associate with the typical image of Henry being a sort of bloated tyrant. He looks quite cross there. He's got quite beady eyes. You can tell he's quite large and quite, he just generally doesn't look like the most pleasant human being, at least of first impressions. The one on the left is a much younger, more athletic looking Henry, and he is deliberately shown there to look more like what you would call a Renaissance prince, which was an arts and culture movement taking place throughout Europe on the time. And really, that's the question I want to ask you is, which of these pictures is a more accurate portrayal of Henry? Is it the one on the left, or is it the one on the right? That is your call to make. We need to look through the evidence in today's lesson. But before we really get into all of that, we need to reflect back on what actually makes a good King of England back in the 16th century. Now, you may remember, and you can flick back through your books to check, that when we were looking at our William the Conqueror unit, we came up with a spider diagram together of characteristics that you would use to describe a good King of England back then. Just for a bit of convenience, some of the things that we came up with were as follows. We said that a good King of England would have confidence. A good King of England would be legitimate. Okay, back then that was very important. By that we mean he needed to be the son, ideally, of a previous king. Needed to be strong, both physically and in the way he could project himself, okay, to inspire confidence in his subjects. He needed to be a good decision maker. The king back then had a lot more power than the queen does today. He was effectively like the prime minister on steroids. He had a lot of power to make a lot of all the key decisions, and so being a good decision maker back then was extremely important. You need to be good at building alliances with other countries. Diplomacy is very, very important back then. Needs to be English, needs to be religious. Remember, we looked at how people took their religious views very seriously back then and were obsessed with that idea of heaven and hell when we think back to the Doom paintings. You need to be able to cope under pressure. Needs to be intelligent. A good king is well educated, is a master in the arts and in music and in Latin and writing and scriptures and so forth, is seen as very important part of the image of the ideal Renaissance prince that we mentioned earlier. You need to be a good military commander as well, able to lead your troops into battle and make good decisions and achieve victories in order to be popular. And finally, he needed to be fair. So what we're actually looking to do today is, all of you need to know the decisions or actions made by Henry as a king. Most of you will evaluate his actions to decide if they were good or bad, and a challenge is to fully judge whether Henry VIII was a good king or bad king. To start off with, you need to look at the worksheet, which looks something like this, and you just go through the boxes. Ideally, if you can, print it off, or if you're doing it on PowerPoint, just add to each box either a G or a B. G meaning good, B meaning bad. Okay, these are all key events that happened in Henry VIII's reign, and you need to decide whether that is in line with with his actions in these is in line with what makes a good king back then. Then You need to pick 3 events that you think are most important in his reign and number them 1, 2, and 3. 1 being the most important thing he did, and 3 being the 3rd most important thing he did. And answer this question. Doesn't have to be a long answer. Is the most important thing he did something which makes him a good or a bad king? So a short paragraph on whether the most important thing he did makes him a good or bad king according to your view and according to what is expressed in the spider diagram that we looked at the start, and is indeed in your book. Then you need to try to link the points together by drawing an arrow and a brief description. For example, the one that you see on the worksheet shows that Henry founding the navy links to him making the country strong, because having a navy would help him keep the country powerful. 2 links is good, 3 links is great, 4 links is amazing. Then finally, think back to the spider diagram on what makes a good king and try to figure out if Henry meets any of these requirements. In your book, write down 1 reason why Henry was either a good or a bad king. The one you think is most important, or the one reason that you think is the most important, needs to be added in there as evidence, and this needs to be explained in appeal format. Okay, you've got sentence starters there in the blue and red boxes if you need them, depending on whether you think he was a good or a bad king is the one that you are going to want to follow. If you really want to challenge yourself, look at both sides of the argument and then lead it to a conclusion, but that is only if time permits. But to summarise today's activities in the simplest terms, it really comes down to which of these 2 portraits of Henry VIII you most identify with, or you think is the most accurate. Was it the bloated king that you see on the right, the so-called tyrant, who was responsible for executing more people in his reign than any other Tudor monarch? Or was it the young athletic king on the left, looking every part of the Renaissance prince and projecting images of strength and power? As such, I leave that to you. And as a last bit, I thought I would show you a song that he composed, Henry VIII himself composed, because there is no doubt, by the way, that he was, regardless of whether you think he was a good king or a bad king, he is no doubt one of the most intelligent kings that has ever ruled over England. And to illustrate that, I leave you with a song that he composed called Pastime with Good Company, which he actually wrote just after he became king and became one of the most popular songs in England at the time, was often played at fairs, etc., and was written about his new wife back then, Catherine of Aragon, and his desire and his beliefs about what life should be about, living it up, as it were. Okay, so I leave that with you. Have fun with this task. Get in touch with me. Get in touch with me if you have any questions.